Hello again, this is Joe Roberts with a continuation of my tutorials on the Tekkit pack, and particularly SGTekkit. In these I'm going to be covering a little bit more on the mass fabricator. I hope you'll excuse me for switching into creative mode. I don't particularly feel like building all of these, and there's not much of a difference because I've been running my tutorials on something with equivalent exchange. Kind of defeats the purpose. Anyways, this over here, the mass fabricator. Like I said, an amazing little piece of thing which allows you to build literally anything. But if you're running it off a single HV solar, which you won't be, it's very, very slow. Even if 512 EU per tick running into it from an HV solar array, this is how slow it goes. But if we throw in scrap, look at it. It's a lot faster. A lot faster. The problem is, where do we get scrap from? Now, as I mentioned, you get scrap from recyclers. Excuse me just a second here. Recyclers. Like so. And when you wire those up to power, yada yada, excuse me just a sec, unprepared and all of that. When you wire these up to power, you can throw anything in there, and it'll eventually be turned into scrap. Very slowly, and you'll have only a 1 in 8 chance, but you will get scrap. Anything you can throw in there. You could throw in, expensive things like transposers. You can throw in glass. There's a couple of things that you can't throw in there, though. You can't throw in sticks. You can't throw in snowballs. Big problem because, you're not going to have everything to recycle all the time. Scrap's kind of hard to come by. So what do? We're not going to use snowballs. We are instead going to use ice. Basically, we want to find a resource that's really easy to turn into scrap, basically. So, what do? We get ice. Ice, like so. And if you notice, ice will turn into scrap. It'll recycle, but there you go. See, scrap. The thing is, you can't really create ice, at least not directly. So what do? Oh, whoops. You can't create ice directly, at least. So what do? We create snowballs. And snowballs go into these things over here, singularity compressors, and are compressed into ice. And then we take this ice, we throw it in the mass fab, and we get scrap. Now you may be wondering, where the heck do we get all the ice from? It's very, very simple. Ice you get from snowmen, or snow you get from snowmen. Snowmen are the way to get snow. Excuse me just a second here. See, these guys like here, these hapless little snow golems, create snow everywhere they walk. So what are we going to do? We're going to mercilessly enslave them to harvest their snowballs. Now, what we're going to want to do with this is a simple setup kind of like this. See, 3 pistons on each side. And a piston, when it pushes, it will not hurt the snowman, but it will push the snow off of the ground. And so then we cage the snowman in. I'm using glass. You can use whatever you want. The covers on the outside are not necessary, but covers on the inside will be. So, the additional thing is you want to be able to suck the snow up from somewhere. So what are we going to do? We are going to use more wonderful little things that we created before. Specifically in this case, you're going to be using a transposer. Transposers usually only suck 1 item up per tick, or per cycle anyways, from a chest. However, if you put them on the ground like this, they'll suck up items that are around them. So, what do we do then? We fill the place with snowmen. Okay, sometimes this takes a little finessing, but it's not all that difficult to do. Just needs to move the snowmen around, and there we go. We have our little snowman cage. Now, all we need to do is power everything. Give me a second here. add a timer, add a way for the timer to connect to redstone tube. For this you'll actually need two different things. You need some kind of jacketed wire, and then you need red alloy wire. It's annoying to have to do this, but this is the way it works. And then you need to run that timer off to your pistons. And then create a little chest over here for everything to be sucked into. And then you see, every time this timer fires, it breaks the snow off the ground, and then the snow is sucked up through that transposer and goes into this chest over here. Now what we do is that we don't want it going into that chest over there. We instead break that chest and then send it over here. Same basic thing we were running before. Goes into the top of the singularity compressors. And then as you can see, boom, it's compressed into ice. Then from here it's real simple. Same stuff I've been running before with filters. Effectively you just run everything out of there. Excuse me. Trying to do this without a screwdriver, but I don't think I can. And then make sure you run these to power. And now see, ice gets sucked out of the singularity compressors, goes into the recyclers, gets turned into scrap. And then from there, more filters. And remember, like I said, it has to go into the bottom of the mass fabricator, but that's not really a big problem. And then jacketed wire to plug those things in, and boom, now you have scrap running to your mass fabricator from those singularity compressors. Simple thing, real simple setup. One of these 3 snowman cages is enough to saturate about 5 singularity compressors, assuming you're running it on a 1-second timer, which means every 1 second it's creating about 5 snow, give or take, normally. This guy is bugged right here, but there we go. See? It creates 5 or 6 snow, depending on where your snowmen are standing. And that's, since these singularity compressors are normally able to handle 1 item every 0.8 seconds, then 5 snow coming out of that will saturate 5 singularity compressors very easily. The problem, as you noticed, is the recyclers. The recyclers are quite slow. There's a way of making them there's 2 ways, basically, of getting the recyclers to process more. One is to add more recyclers, which is a bit of a suboptimal solution because it takes a lot of time and these things are bouncing around, yada yada. But the second thing is to use overclockers. Now, overclockers are another upgrade, similar to the transformer upgrade, which basically allow a machine to run faster. Now, they don't work too well for the spin-up machines like the singularity compressor, the rotary macerator, etc. But for a vanilla machine, well, relatively vanilla machines like the recycler, what they do is that they speed it up by a percentage, and then they increase the power consumption by a percentage, which basically means that a recycler, I think it's, they speed it up by 70%, and then increase the power consumption by 60%, something like that. I'm sure you can find it online. I'll link it. I'll send a link in the description. But basically what they do is that they increase the speed of the machine and increase power consumption. You can see as I add more recyclers, the thing speeds up. The optimal for recyclers is, I think, 10 overclockers. There's really no difference between adding overclockers to a machine and making more of the machine. Usually adding more overclockers is a better idea. But as you can see, if we have 10 overclockers in here. Oh, that's interesting. Huh. Seems to only work with 8. But as you can see, when you have 8 overclockers in here, it's going very, very fast. And 8 overclockers in each of these machines, and suddenly you have a lot of scrap going to the mass fabricator, which makes it run very, very quickly. Now, this machine over here is good for a certain amount of power. I'll leave the calculations up to you. They're not all that difficult if you have the numbers, which unfortunately I don't. But a single HV solar array running a mass fabricator, one of these 5 singularity compressors is more than enough. Now remember, on SGTekkit, it is a server. It does have a limited amount of bandwidth and processing power, so this is kind of going to put a drain on this server. What you want to do more than anything else with this machine is have kill switches. Now, for any good machine on SGTekkit, which is to say any machine at all, you want to have kill switches, which turn the whole thing off. So that means that when you are not at your computer, when you're not around, or you leave the chunk, for example, just flick the switch, the entire machine comes to a stop. That is extremely important if you're on SGTekkit. You must have off switches for everything. But it's not all that difficult, because as long as you're in the chunk, you just flip that one switch, and then suddenly the whole thing is functional again. You have your mass fabricator running at the speed you want, and no one's going to get mad at you for it. This has been another tutorial on an ice generator. I'll run some more tutorials in the future on better ways to generate power than an HV solar, which is very resource intensive.